and the deadline is.
Text Councilmember Duando. There he is. Good morning.
Good morning.
All right.
Good morning.
We got one cat has arrived and the other has run away. Okay, here we go.
Okay, and Michelle says ready.
Okay, all good. Let's, well, good morning. We're going to start now. This is the first meeting of the Planning, Housing, Economic Development Committee since the start of the COVID-19 crisis. We had suspended committee meetings for many months in order to resolve technical issues and minimize the amount of time that council staff had to spend in the building. And so we were running a lot of items through the full council. But now that we've gotten through the budget process, we are initiating a limited committee meeting schedule. PHED committee at the moment is basically going to be one committee meeting, a little less than one a week, somewhere between one every 2 weeks and maybe 1.5 every 2 weeks, depending on what we can squeeze in. So we don't have as much time as we would normally have for a lot of items. So I think, I don't know who's watching at the moment, but if you have a small item that needs to get through the PHED committee, it might be a little time unless it has some, very significant time basis of itself. Nevertheless, I'm really happy we are starting this process, and we are going to begin today's committee meeting with a focus on tenant services and a contract that has been long awaited and significantly revised. I think certainly significantly improved from what the council initially received a year ago, maybe more than a year ago. So Linda has prepared a packet. Before we begin the packet, I'm happy to open the floor to my colleagues if you wanted to make any kind of prefatory comment. And I'll say to my colleagues, if you can text me, I think we'll do it like we do the full council. I'm not sure if it's going to be as easy to have the kind of open mic discussions like we have when we're in person. It could work or it may not. So for now, let's just start with just text me the word speak and I'll cue you in. Unless either of my colleagues wants to say something, we'll start with the packet. Linda?
Okay. So this item is a discussion of tenant support services, and you are correct. We were here, although in person, just about a year ago. So this is an opportunity for you to both discuss the departments and the executive's recommendations for certain non-competitive contracts related to tenant support services, both for FY20 and also for FY21. I would just say that as we think about FY20, we do need to keep in mind that there are only a few weeks left in FY20. So if we are to approve something with that funding, that would have to move forward relatively expeditiously. FY21 clearly has some more time for discussion. What you'll see in your packet is that in May, you received a recommendation from the Chief Administrative Officer to use $218,000 that is in the FY20 budget of the Department of Housing and Community Affairs for 4 contracts. One is to the Housing Investment Partnership for $30,000 for tenant education services. One is to the Latino Economic Development Corporation for $45,000 for tenant education services. One is to Legal Aid Bureau, $47,510 for on-site legal assistance at the district court. And one is to the Renters Alliance for $95,090 for tenant education services. This actually came about because this time last year, you had received the FY20 recommendation from the executive to add $218,000 to enhance tenant support services. At the time, there was a recommendation for one single contract, and the council asked that the executive use a modified solicitation process in order to receive proposals to see who else, might have proposals that would come forward that would serve the county's tenants. What I've suggested for you for the process for discussing this is to talk about the background and the process for FY20, then to also discuss what services and supports are likely to be required given the current health and economic crisis from COVID-19. The world of what may be impacting tenants has changed substantially in the last few months. It certainly is not what it was a year ago, and it certainly is not what it was even in December when the solicitation went out. And as Councilmember Reamer knows, DHCA has started their recovery team, so he's already been a part of certain discussions around how tenants and landlords may be impacted by the COVID situation. And then I would suggest discussing the FY21 recommendations, but also deferring final action on them based on the discussion you have about how things have changed during the COVID crisis. And so I would just, in the packet, I would just say there's a little background about the solicitation process. It did go out in December of 2019. I would just say that at the time, DHCA was also considering having more funding above the 218, and so they asked for a wide range of solicitations. They asked for them proposals in 4 areas: tenant information and education services, tenant association organizing services, court-based legal assistance, and financial literacy and credit counseling. Except for the legal services, organizations had to be a nonprofit entity to apply. And DHCA actually did a lot of outreach. They sent the solicitation out to over 70 organizations, and they also shared it with the cities of Rockville and Gaithersburg and Tacoma Park. So I think they really did work hard to try to get the solicitation out to organizations in order to receive a wide range of proposals. And then, as mentioned earlier, in May, you received the recommendations for the FY20 awards. And then also within the FY21 budget, there was a recommendation through the non-competitive section for 2 contracts, one to the Renters Alliance and one to the Latino Economic Development Corporation, that would use the FY21 funding. And so that would also have been part of the consideration. And so we're here today to talk about both, but they have different timelines. And so I just do want to emphasize that in terms of the FY20 money. So I think, are there any questions or comments from?
Yeah, maybe we should invite DHCA to
Right.
share any comments at this juncture, and then we'll continue through them.
Morning, this is Asim Nigam. I'm the director of DHCA. Thank you very much. It's good to meet in the committee meetings after a long period of time. I know that this is a new normal. So, but thank you anyway to start the committee meetings again. So just quickly, based on what the county executive has recommended, and if you go down the memory lane, going back to last fall, we had put in more money into the RFP. We had expanded the scope of service for the RFP. But then, given the new budget reality and the guidance that we got from the council in terms of continuity of operations, we limited our award to what we have in our budget currently, $218,000 for FY20, and we are using the same budget line for FY21. Now, in terms of the services that we are recommending, as Linda eloquently mentioned, we are recommending 4 organizations: HIP, LEDC, Meriden Legal Aid, and Renters Alliance for FY20, totaling $218,000. So All of those organizations provide tenant education services and on-site legal assistance at district court, which is very timely, even in this COVID-19 situation. If you look at tenant education services or organizing, they go in tandem, basically, working with the tenants who can work with the landlords, making sure that the tenants understand their rights and responsibilities, and also to provide a good working relationship between the tenants and the landlords so that we can restrict the evictions to as low as possible. So that's the idea here. And if you look at our tenant database in the county, DSCA cannot reach out to all of the tenants by themselves. We do need our nonprofits to help organize the tenants and also provide education services. Now, in terms of the legal aid, we are recommending Maryland Legal Aid Inc. They will provide on-site legal services. They will not represent the tenants in the district court, but they will meet with the tenants on the day when the tenants are supposed to go to the court. And along with the Bar Foundation, they will be able to provide services through phone, or if someone cannot speak English, they can provide services in a different language as well.
I'm sorry,
So
which foundation, Dr. Nagam?
this is Bar Association Foundation.
Oh, the bar, like the ABA. Okay,
Correct.
yeah.
So we have a variety of sources otherwise available in the county. And if you look at the Maryland Legal Aid and Bar Association, in FY20, we funded them to the tune of $170,000. And also we funded CASA for $165,000 for immigration legal assistance and $250,000 to provide tenant counseling. So beyond what our recommendation is, there are other services that are available, and the idea over here is through education services, through tenant organizing, we can provide those linkages to the tenants where to obtain those services. Because a lot of times tenants have no idea where to go. And that's the theme over here with this RFP, even though it's modified, but this is very timely, and we certainly believe that our recommendations for both FY20 and FY21 are very timely, and we'll be happy to answer any questions. We hope that the committee approves both of these recommendations for the fiscal years.
Thank you, Seem. Appreciate your overview there. I want to say I'm really pleased that LEDC is also on the list for support to provide tenant services. I met with them about a bit over a year ago, and learned that they have a substantial tenant education and outreach program, but that they were not operating that program in the county. And that's a really solid organization with just a very strong foundation, good leadership, a real track record of accountability, and someone that a group that I think the council has a lot of confidence in, in general. So when I learned that they provide tenant services, I was certainly hopeful that we could add them to our portfolio of organizations that we support. So I think that the recommendation to provide a designation for them is a good one. And then, of course, the legal aid is, that's the big issue now. So I think we should get into this conversation about the big picture. Now, item 3 on the agenda, we're going to get an update from DHCA about the various mission groups that are, operating. So we'll have a chance then as well to talk about a wide array of housing issues. But, I think now we can kind of talk about what are the urgent needs and why. So Linda has mentioned that, legal aid is going to be a crucial issue. Director Nagam has mentioned that because we have a lot of tenants that are, they're struggling. We'll learn a little bit more about which tenants, but, generally speaking, this is a really tough time for a lot of people, and we know that there's some non-payment. We don't know how much. And so just due to the way that Maryland law is, you get a lot of filings for eviction, which tenants don't necessarily understand. And what we really need to do is we need to help tenants talk to their landlords and come up with arrangements so that they can preserve their housing and continue to have a place to live. And that's a negotiation process. So in order to do that, you need some legal, you need to know the law, you need to know your rights, and you need a little bit of good advice. And that's where I think supporting the legal aid comes in. So, the fact that we can provide support to legal aid organizations that will be at the courthouse is very timely. And we're going to need to, I think we're going to need to expand that so that those contracts are sufficient to, that we can be on the ground in the biggest possible way, in the court system, providing that urgent help in FY21. It was interesting. I heard you say, Director Nagam, that the legal aid does not represent people in court. What they do is they provide counseling there. That's an important distinction. But again, what folks need to know is how to assert themselves. Potentially what other what options they may have, what they might be able to negotiate for, and then how to proceed, how to protect themselves. And we certainly know that property owners are going to have all that information at hand. So we've got to just kind of level the playing field here a little bit in this process, which is not going to be easy. So with that as a little background, my colleague Andrew Friedson has asked to be recognized. So Andrew.
Thank you to the staff and for the thorough report. Thank you to DHCA for putting this forward. A few questions. First is, you mentioned, Director Nagam, the original intent to have more money than the $218,000, but changing that based on the continuity of services that the council put forward. Am I mistaken that the budget was proposed, by the county executive with 218? Did we lower that based on, is this a separate proposal from what was put in the recommended budget by the county executive?
Director Nagam, you're on mute. You can, Steve and Frank, you can just leave your computers on. You don't have to mute.
Okay, sure. Thank you. So originally, pre-COVID-19, and Frank can correct me if my memory is not correct, our recommendation was for about $578,000 or something. So given the new direction that we got from the council, we tailored it to the extent that we had the money for in our FY20 budget, $218,000. And Frank can jump in and tell us if he has a different memory on this.
Just to put it in context, the $218,000 in the 2020 budget was targeted for tenant organizing. As myself and the director looked at the proposal, looked at the broader strategic objectives, tenant organizing, tenant education, and helping our tenant residents advance their personal financial and control of their opportunities. We worked with the staff. The staff had a number of ideas and recommendations that had been in process or been thinking about. We focused on available funding in the DHCA budget and identified that within the available funding, in addition to the $218,000, that the additional funding would support the initiatives that we undertake with the Housing Initiative Fund, supporting the preservation and protection of existing affordable housing. And we put together the RFP and the range of services in a supportive structure for the preservation of existing affordable housing, empowering the tenants, engaging our tenants in understanding their rights, and we've structured it so that it would really support ongoing efforts as we work with the process of acquisition, refinancing, redevelopment of property. So it was a combination of ideas and structures that we thought complemented and expanded the delivery of services that were currently only being delivered through tenant organizing, which is just a vehicle for delivering tenant education. So we very much thought we had a good package for a longer term investment. And as the budget realities unfolded, we adjusted the focus on the more immediate impact items.
Okay, so just so I'm clear, was the county executive's recommended budget for FY21 when it was sent over on March 16th, did that have the 578,000 for this, or the 218,000? Because the suggestion was that the change was due to COVID. And I'm a little confused on the timeline because it doesn't seem to match up. I thought that the recommended budget had 218,000 in, unless I'm mistaken.
You're correct. 218,000 fiscal 21 budget recommendation to carry the same structure as the fiscal 21. Our adjustments were based on a recognition that the broader budgetary challenges, rather than making some of these longer term investments that we thought were appropriate in fiscal 20, that we would spread it out over fiscal 21, and that we would scale back some of the structural strategic investments that were reflected in the RFP.
Okay, so just to be clear, it had nothing to do with COVID or the council's continuity of services approach to the budget, because it was sent over as a continuity of service before we even got the budget. You continued. I just want to make sure I'm understanding, because I'm confused as to the.
So I think if the larger package had come over, then you would have also been having a discussion about the recommendation to use funding from the Housing Initiative Fund to go above the 218,000. The 218,000 is the amount in both the FY20 and the FY21 budget that was specifically for the expansion of the tenant services.
And the 218, sorry, Andrew, but
No, please.
the executive recommended 218,000 in FY21, the same as FY20. So
Yeah, it was just suggested. I just wanted to clear up because it was
county council did not reduce
the council necessitated a reduction because of the way that we approach the budget as continuity of services, and that COVID had something to do with that decision. And clearly, it had to do with other factors having nothing to do with any decision made by the council or by the public health.
It was other priorities in the
that happened after. And so I just wanted to clarify that, because I think it was confusing as it was initially presented. So I have a few other questions. How did you choose, when you put this out, how did you choose among the different priority areas within, within this? There's tenant education, legal assistance, tenant organizing, and financial literacy. How did you choose, based on the proposals coming forward? That's a pretty broad range of, how do you value one versus the other in terms of the dollar amounts that are provided to different organizations? How did that process work specifically?
So Frank, you want to take this?
I'll speak to it.
Yeah.
I'll speak to it together, and we have Stephanie Killian standing by to help with some more of the technicals. The broadness of the RFP was purposeful. We asked for services to be defined based on the capabilities and the expertise of organizations. So we wanted to see how the potential service offers would come in. And then based on the strengths of those service offers and the proposals, we were able to review what we determined to be the potential impact for the amount of the proposed support or expense, and look to the delivery of the what we consider to be the targeted value to the tenants in terms of support for their understanding and capabilities with respect to landlord-tenant law and regulations. And then there were very significant ideas included, and they leverage the existing capabilities of organizations. So we were able to evaluate relative value to the overall support for the tenant community and made determinations on the scoring that was included in the RFP.
So mostly a subjective determination. There's no objective, this was this percentage, this was that percentage. There
was a scoring that was very specific in terms of the things that needed to be addressed, and then in terms of the financial efficiency of the proposals. But it was broadly worded, and so there was a fair amount of subjective opportunity.
Okay. Based off of that, was there a change to the type of proposals you got for FY21 or a change to the priorities for FY21? Because there's a significant change between what activities and organizations are funded in FY20 versus what activities and organizations are funded in FY21. And I didn't know if that was a function of different proposals or a function of different standards that you are judging them by.
Yeah, the proposal we're making is to use the submissions that came in the December-January solicitation for both the FY20 and the FY21. So there was not a second solicitation for the FY21. The recommendation reflects the prioritization of accelerating the tenant education component, which is a more direct delivery of the information and support to the tenant, and the tenant organizing, which is more of a sustaining activity, leveraging larger buildings and the ability of the tenant organization that is targeted to carry that forward. So it's just a relative.
I thought is tenant organizing part of the proposal? I thought the only two things that were funded were tenant education and legal assistance, no tenant organizing and no financial literacy. Am I mistaken?
Affirmative. In the fiscal 20, the proposal was to transition to the tenant organizing in fiscal 21 as the longer-term investment.
So effectively in FY21, tenant organizing is replacing legal assistance in terms of the priority of the department in the proposal.
And with the timing of what's going on, the tenant legal assistance would be carrying forward for 12 months, and we would be revisiting that as we go through the year for next year.
So you believe that the legal aid funding funded at the very end of fiscal 20 will last and be sufficient for the full fiscal year of FY21, but that the rest of the funding for tenant education won't be? Or are you saying that you're viewing the tenant organizing completely separate for FY21, and so you're taking, this is a education and legal aid focused in 20 and an organizing focused in 21?
That's correct. That the funding at this point and the proposals that were made were effectively for 12 months worth of activity for both the tenant education and for the legal aid. And then the tenant organizing would be the complementary services that would be added and to broaden the delivery of tenant education over the course of fiscal 21.
And has there been any determinations that have changed based on COVID in terms of the focus on organizing versus the focus on legal issues, given all of the eviction challenges and the other number of legal changes and other things that are taking place, the risk of losing homes for tenants when the stay on evictions is lifted and the court resumes its regular processing?
If I can interject here, Councilor Pearson. So this is not to say that legal aid is not important in FY21, but we are funding Madam legal aid to the full request that they had requested to us. And then to your point, in case we find that we need additional money, we can always come back to the council and amend their contract. Now, that being said, we also believe that for FY21, tenant organizing is going to be a very important function in terms of where to provide linkages to the tenants, where to get the services, whether it's legal or it's education or it's financial literacy. So that's a very important piece of the puzzle over here. So that's why for FY21, we are recommending 2 organizations for organizing services for the tenants.
Okay, I appreciate the clarifications. I mean, I do have some concerns about, it feels like the proposal before us is not for the same services for FY20 and FY21, and it's in some ways a way to combine the 218,000, multiply it by 2, and fund different services in different ways. And the suggestion of just being able to come back to the council for more money, while I understand where that is coming from, and certainly that is always an opportunity given the fiscal challenges that we face moving forward and the likelihood that we're going to be reducing aspects of the budget as part of the continuity of services budget approach that we took, and the agreement that we were going to come back based on guidance and initiative from the county executive as a council to review the budget needs in the summer or early fall. I don't think that that's a likely scenario of availability of additional resources and additional funds. So I have some concerns there. So, I think the staff recommendation of, separating out FY20 and 21 makes sense, but I'll yield to wait and hear from colleagues.
Thank you. I'm going to call next on Councilmember Jawando, but I'll just ask a question of Linda. So procedurally, do we need to, we can take your recommendations as together and or we could take them separately. I'm happy to take them together, but we'll proceed through this conversation just to set the predicate here. We don't have to go fully through an FY20 and then do an FY21. We have a recommendation that kind of for both in the document. Okay, Councilmember Jawando.
Thank you, Council Chair Reamer. I'm used to saying we haven't said chair in a while, so right. I'm a little rusty.
Exactly.
Thank you, Director Nagam and Deputy Director Damaris, and thank you, Linda, for all your work on the packet. It's good to be back in committee. A couple of questions. Obviously, I'm extremely concerned with the opening of the courts and the potential for a large-scale type of eviction that disproportionately hits people who are already hurting or were already in trouble and before COVID. So if you guys could talk to me, obviously we've done what we're doing and continue to do what we can on the council as far as stabilizing things and putting a cap on increases for 180 days after, and then also providing additional rental assistance, and we know that those things are working, but that's not going to solve the problem. And so in the context of this request, if you could talk a little bit about at least the beginning of the thinking of how this is going to be targeted. For example, if you look at the OLO report from a few years ago, it's not rocket science to know where the biggest risks are. It's these, low to moderate income garden style apartments that have already traditionally had the higher eviction rates. And so is there some discussion with the contractors here? I'm also glad that it's been spread out between several organizations that have unique assets and skills and that have done a track record. Have you talked about how you're going to target this outreach in light of COVID, in light of the looming emergency as far as courts reopen July into August, and how you're going to work with folks to make sure, for example, for the legal aid in FY20, that those folks have representation and you have a handle on that? Is that factored into the discussion you've had with the contractors?
Okay. So the conversations with contractors really have not continued past the RFP submissions, other than we're working with partners in general on the current crisis, so not specific to the proposals in the RFP. The awareness and the focus on supporting tenant questions, issues, challenges. Our Office of Landlord Tenant Affairs has a very robust staff and handles, at this point, is handling all the calls coming in and managing it, the understanding that, this is going to increase substantially and potentially exponentially as the unemployment insurance burns off and as the courts reopen and we look at the eviction processing continuing. So the court-based support is on site on landlord-tenant day. An expectation is that we should, the system should be able to handle the number of cases that get scheduled. There's just going to be a very long number of days and months of processing. They can only handle so many per day.
Right.
But there's absolutely a demand issue. And right now we believe we have a fairly robust support for responding, but it will be taxed, it will be tested. The educational component is focused on helping the tenants through outreach and through multiple organizations, as we're proposing, to improve their understanding of the tenants, the landlords, particularly trying to avoid getting to the court, getting to that stage, helping to facilitate communications. Hopefully that could end up in repayment plans, but right now it's a lot of it is trying to figure out how broad and where to focus those resources. And as you said, the challenges are going to be geographically concentrated, and that's actually part of the broader effort on education, is to be efficient in how and where we deliver that information.
I appreciate that, and that was kind of where I was going there. The suggestion of I think we can anticipate there. I think there'll also be some people that you didn't anticipate just because of the scope of this crisis. But to the extent that we can, you have three. Once these are approved in some form, that there can be some coordination between DHCA, the staff you have on embedded and landlord tenant and Rosie and her team, and these contractors, so that we can be efficient and coordinated and try to anticipate what we know is coming, and I think we all have a role to play with you. And obviously I've referred a ton of people to DHCA throughout this process. I know, oftentimes folks will call council members and, when you need help, and they'll reach out to everybody. And so I think we want to make sure that you all have the capacity to follow up. The second question I had was related to the similar question that Councilmember Friedson talked about. I would tend to think that while both are important, both the organizing and the legal aid, if you could just explain to me again the rationale of front loading, of the way you split out the FY20 money and the FY21 money, and what were the factors that you considered when you did that again?
So the factors in the tenant education are the proposals embedded, the development of the information resources, the website, the materials, the educational outreach for a broad-based, not project-based, but community-based outreach on tenant education. Tenant organizing is project-based tenant education, and it would focus on leveraging the capacity of an organization in the property to carry forward the support and the ongoing communication. So the higher priority was to expand and broaden the tenant education. Tenant organizing takes more time and has longer support impact because of the on-site tenant-based leadership. The legal aid is structured and supported, as Director Gom said, to fund 100% of the proposal that was presented by the legal aid, Maryland Legal Aid. And given the structure in the courts, the expectation, the hope is, and they are a very efficient organization, that with this site-based approach in the court, that it would augment all the other work they're doing and would support that specific activity. And we would hope sufficiently, but as we said, we're not sure. We're not sure how the court activity and the court docket will work. But given the prior court docket, it was expected to be able to support. So it's, prioritization.
All right, I appreciate that. I get that. The courts can't process if the courts are serving as the mitigating factor here, in that they can't process but so fast, and so the legal aid money can work its way through. And but that obviously is a concern if depending on the number. Last question I have just right now is, have you seen, are you getting increased complaints? And I don't know if Rosie's around, but this is related. Since we passed the stabilization bill, as far as rent increases or lack of maintenance or other issues on responsiveness, have you seen a spike in complaints or calls in? And if you can quantify that in any way, and if you can give me some response now, but if not, I'd like to have a formal response as far as from the office in written form, if you can't answer it now.
I mean, we have received some complaints through 311 or inquiries about the maximum rent increase. So we had to educate the tenants, and there were a couple of cases, I don't have the exact number with me, where there was an issue, the rent could be increased beyond 2.6%. And then on the maintenance, I believe we are getting regular calls, but we can always get back to you with a finite number.
Yeah, that'd be great. I'd love to just see over the last several months just what we've gotten in and how that relates to the previous. And I just think that's something we want to keep an eye on going forward. So thank you.
And also, I would say that our work with this tenants RFP will not end over here. I mean, in a little bit, we'll talk about the recovery effort, and Councilman Reamer attended our eviction and homeless prevention work group. So some of the things will overlap with that work group in terms of where the needs are and how to bring resources, where there's more resources towards legal aid. So that factor will be looked at in that recovery group, work group as such.
Thank you.
Okay, I'm going to turn it next to Councilmember Friesen. Before I do that, Linda, could you walk through the legal? You outlined some of the landmark issues that will be the context for all of this conversation over the next 3, 6 months and year. I thought it was really helpful. Thank you for this terrific packet as always. There could be some folks who are watching who may not be as familiar. Linda, could you just walk us through those key milestones that are ahead of us?
Right. So there are a lot of protections currently in place because the courts have been closed and because of the governor's order. And actually, I would just say that our own district court administrative judge actually took action even before the governor's order, and that helped in Montgomery County quite a bit. So we were thankful for that. But currently, the governor has an order, and it stays evictions or repossessions of residential real property if the tenant can demonstrate that they suffered a substantial loss of income from COVID-19 emergency. And that can include several things. It can include job loss, a reduction of hours, the need to miss work to care for a child. And it also makes it clear that if you have a confirmed diagnosis of COVID-19, that you can't be evicted as a clear and imminent danger. There's some other parts of the law that allow for other evictions. So that was a big protection, but I did want to highlight for folks that this particular protection applies to tenants who can show an impact from COVID-19, and there is going to be documentation that's going to be required of tenants in order for the courts to determine, how this falls out and how they're going to process the eviction. So as that process comes back into place, that'll be one area where education and I think more one-on-one assistance is going to be needed.
Let me pause you there. So just this is a really big one. So there's a protection that is available for tenants if they can document a significant impact from COVID-19.
Correct.
So they will need to know how to do that, and that's going to require some advice. So
yes.
The urgency for getting legal aid into the system here is just really high. And again, I think that gets to what's the FY21 plan here. But even right now, the word needs to be getting out there even now. Okay, please continue.
Okay. And then in the memo, I did show you that the courts have put out a reopening schedule in terms of phases to get the court district court fully operational by October 5th. Along the way, in different phases, they're taking on certain eviction cases. So for example, in phase 2, which would start June 5th, they can hear emergency breach of lease actions involving threats or injury to people or property, and some other wrongful actions. It's really not until August 31st that they're going to hear general failure to pay rent cases. But in the July timeframe, they also will hear some rent escrow actions and tenant holding over actions. And I would just say that there are cases that were filed before the courts closed, and they will come up. So it's not as if there weren't already cases in the queue where people may need assistance with evictions, and those will come up potentially sooner in the process. But it looks like sort of the general failure to pay rent cases won't be heard until the end of August, but that, of course, will come sooner, and people will need to be prepared for that. And then also, the CARES Act had certain restrictions on covered properties. So this includes public housing, federally subsidized housing, residential property that's subject to a federally backed mortgage, and that's in place until July 25th, 2020. So after that moratorium, a landlord cannot evict on less than 30 days notice, and the notice could not be given during the moratorium. But after July 25th, certain properties, of course, this depends on how the court hears cases, but there are certain properties that are covered until July 25th.
What kinds of properties are more likely to be covered by a federally backed mortgage?
I think acquisitions of certain properties, often often a component of a package is a federally backed mortgage.
Okay.
But Asim?
So these are the properties like which have FHA insurance or Freddie or Fannie type, backed mortgages.
So it's multifamily. It's not just an individual homeowner who has a mortgage and is renting out their house, although that could be also, but it could be multifamily.
For multifamily, the extent is like for 90 days. For homeowners, more like 6 months, and then which could be extended by another 6 months in terms of forbearance. So that's what we were talking about here.
And that's the forbearance, but the actual eviction of people from those properties is covered under this July 25th moratorium.
Okay, but it's only until July 25th.
Right.
Okay.
So those are some of the milestones in terms of being prepared for when the courts reopen, for when different kinds of cases can be heard, and for when some protections end. Now we don't know when the governor may lift his order, so that could stay in place. But certainly, as the courts open, we'll start to either hear cases that were filed before the COVID emergency, or where the tenant cannot show that the eviction is really directly related to a loss of income during the COVID emergency.
Okay. Andrew.
Thank you. Thanks for this discussion. I think it's a really important one that's clarified a lot of points. And it's a really important issue. And I think that all of us have recognized that the whole world has changed and the needs have changed, and those who are disproportionately impacted by the public health emergency and the resulting economic crisis that has followed will linger for quite some time. I mean, when the governor lifts the stay-at-home order, when we slowly move into reopening, that is not going to fix the challenges in the economy, and it's not going to change those who are disproportionately impacted, unfortunately. And my understanding is before COVID even happened, there was a 5-week backlog in the sheriff's office for evictions. When that starts back up again, unfortunately, I think we have to expect that there are going to be thousands of cases that need to be dealt with, and we need to make sure that residents have sufficient representation, understand what their legal rights are. And so to me, I think to have the same approach pre-COVID as post-COVID on how we address these issues does not seem to meet the moment that we are in and reflect the reality that we face. And I think we need to be flexible and mindful of that, understanding what the challenges are. A couple quick follow-ups related to that. One, comment was made earlier that you wanted to fully fund legal aid for this year. Didn't think that meant that you didn't think that would require you to fully fund it or fund it at all in the subsequent year. What were the full amounts of the proposals for tenant education, the other piece that's being funded in FY20? Did you fully fund the tenant education from the organizations that are being funded for those issues, or partial funds? How did that play out?
So for HIP, they had requested $40,000. We are recommending $30,000 in FY20. LEDC requested $65,000. We are recommending $45,400. Of course, legal assistance is funded in full. Then Renters Alliance requested $105,200. We are recommending $95,090.
And then the full amount the following year, or that's the organizing is the amount that they're requesting the following year.
For the following years, the organizing services, they had requested $182,700, and we are recommending $113,010. And LEDC had requested for FY21 organizing services $135,000. We are recommending $104,990.
Okay, and no organizations applied for, requested anything related to financial literacy. Is that accurate?
No, there was, I believe, CASA had requested, and HIP and LEDC had requested for financial literacy and credit counseling. But as I understand, when the proposals were reviewed and they were scored, they didn't score that high enough. But then in terms of education services, some of the things in terms of financial literacy and tenant counseling is in part and parcel of that education services. Now, in terms of providing budget trainings or something, that may not be within that education services, but those linkages can happen. We can point the tenants in the right direction, that which agencies in the county are providing those services.
So the education directs them to the financial education services, but wouldn't provide financial literacy education and credit counseling specifically. Is that what you were saying?
Well, in terms
they would allow them to know what resources are available through education, but wouldn't be providing the direct seminar, for instance, or pamphlet, brochure, or other type of class or resource.
Well, that is what my understanding is when the proposals came in, and I'll have Frank clarify that point as well.
Frank, you got to unmute yourself. The host will often mute everybody, so you'll have to unmute yourself.
So the answer is correct that the RFP separated those functions. Financial literacy and credit counseling are generally providing budgeting, savings, credit management, longer-term household development tools. And the focus of the tenant education is more the transactional and the rights and responsibilities in the tenancy and protections under tenant law. And the focus, as we adjusted our approach, was to prioritize the more immediate tenant education, tenant services, and to not recommend that we fund financial literacy and credit counseling at this time, with the focus on the what we expect to be the biggest challenges in tenancy and the management of tenancy.
Got it. And do you think if you put out the requests again, in light of the fact that these were put out in December, from my understanding, which was well before COVID, when the whole world has changed, do you think that the same amount of money and the same proposals would be put forward for tenant education and for legal aid? Do you think that they would see the needs being similar and they would see the work being exactly the same of what they proposed in December as to what they potentially would need to propose moving forward?
I believe unless we change the scope of our request, the proposals address the scope of our request, and it remains with our recommendation that the tenant education services are appropriate to the current situation. The legal aid is a really uncertain component, as is being discussed here, which is the breadth and depth of the need outside of the courts. And our focus was on, court-based, site-based support on the event of landlord-tenant court dates. So there's a potential for expansion of the RFP beyond that, and there could be interest, or there could be and would be ideas more broadly stated.
But you think even within the court, you don't think legal aid would have requested more money if they knew that the needs related to COVID are occurring and the number of potential eviction cases potentially will skyrocket? There's already a significant backlog.
Well, I may be conjecturing over here. They could have requested more money. Of course, this was prior to COVID-19, but we are funding their full request in FY20.
I understand. And then my last question on this is, when you put out the requests, were the applicants aware that they were requesting for both FY20 and FY21, that this was a 2-year request?
No, they were requesting they were requested to present a 1-year budget and 1-year delivery of services.
Okay, so we are kind of changing what we're providing based on what was put forward in a public process.
They're fundamentally going to be 12-month contracts. The 12 months at this stage covers the fiscal 21 time period.
So then we didn't spend the $218,000 in FY20, and so we're going to spend double that in FY21. Is that what you're? And that's the reason for not funding legal aid in what you're calling FY21?
That's correct.
Okay.
That's a bit different than how it was presented. I will
Okay.
point out.
Councilmember Joando.
Thank you, Mr. Reamer. Just going back to a point was made, I mean, regardless of where we land today, and I think this is going to be needed money, I'm glad Councilmember Friedson alluded to this. The scope of this problem is something that we've never faced before. And, I signed a letter, and I know several of my colleagues, not everybody, but several of my colleagues with others around the state, really, we're going to need federal and state help, asking the governor to extend for a year the protections so that people can try to catch up. I mean, I just think the idea that whatever we do with education, let people know their rights, I mean, absent some serious federal money to support both landlords, property owners, and renters, we are going to be in a serious problem. We already had the highest eviction rate, in the state because of, our size and the cost of living. And so I'm really worried that that part of it, the advocacy at the state and federal level, is something that we're going to all need to focus on, because if we have thousands of people, we're doing such a great job on homelessness, we can't, that could be a devastating step back and really hard to recover from in a place where vacancy rates tend to be low. And, I was just talking to some property owners the other day about, and they're still low. I mean, and so it's going to be really hard to get people back in absent that. So to Director Nagam and Frank, whoever wants to answer it, are you in conversations with the governor's team about what their long-term plans are? Is that going to be a focus of the recovery group? I know we're getting to that, but I just want to lay that on the table. If you're watching this, I don't want anyone to be confused that, you know, whatever amount of money we put forward, we want to be helpful, but this is not going to be enough in light of the crisis that we're facing.
So the short answer to your question, Councilor Javando, is yes. I mean, as the work is going to continue for eviction and homeless prevention work group, we're going to look at different options, whether they are for marketing, education, financial, and then on the legal side. So if there is something that we need to collectively approach the governor's office to have some legal changes made into the system to help up both our tenants and also the property owners, that's something the work group will be looking at going forward.
And also the council. I mean, I know we have things that we can do, and they're more limited than the governor, but I would include that. I hope you include coming back to us.
Sure.
Okay.
Absolutely. I mean, we have council staff, we have Councilor Reamer attending those work group meetings, so they are a part of that whole discussion.
All right. Thank you.
All right, so we have a staff recommendation, which is to approve the FY20 designations for the non-competitive awards, but to defer action on the FY21. And I certainly agree with that recommendation. And I want to say for FY21, I think we need to rethink this so that we can focus on legal aid, legal assistance, you know, the problems that people will have in the courts. And I do not think that we should put a big priority on general tenant outreach and organizing, you know, at the expense of legal defense. So, you know, we're going to have some work to do to fine-tune the FY21 appropriation. But, you know, I think we can certainly move ahead with the FY20.
If I can just interject for a second, Councilor Reamer, our recommendation is to approve, and the committee can, you know, approve whatever they want to approve. But in terms of FY21 recommendation, to approve as they have been presented. Excuse me. And the reason being, for $218,000 that's being recommended for FY21, quite frankly, I'm not sure all of that money would be sufficient for legal aid if we see a tsunami of evictions coming. So that's a bigger approach that has to be taken as a part of the recovery work group that we have embarked upon. So, and tenant organizing is a defined service. We need that service for our tenants in the county, which includes tenant education services as well. So this is the basic step in terms of telling our tenants where those services are, what their rights are, what their responsibilities are. So we would request you to approve FY21 recommendations as well, and then also look at the legal aspect, legal aid in a bigger picture, which may need more dollars than we are showing over here, 218,000, you know, over here.
Thank you. My Councilmember Friedson wishes to speak, but I'd like to just ask Linda first. Can you please just express your memos and your recommendation?
Yes. So again, I do want to say, I think that the FY20 recommendation that came over was really reflective of many things that the council asked for in regards of putting out a solicitation, looking at multiple organizations, and doing things differently than where we were a year ago. And I think the mix is quite good. And we do have a time limitation on approving the FY20 recommendations if they're going to be encumbered so that we can enter into these 12-month contracts. And so I don't see, I do recommend approval of the FY20 package. I do think that, and I did include some information in the packet from the 2018 report on evictions from OLO. And I think that it still is really informative about some of the issues that we're going to be facing when this occurs. And so, you know, there are things that I think in terms of a whole package for FY21, it's not to say that there wouldn't be a tenant organizing component to that, but I think it's really critical that when we look at the package for FY21, that we look at, again, the financial literacy and credit counseling, I think that may, in fact, become a more critical component than it would have been when we were talking in December. We know back during the foreclosure crisis, we did have contracts with nonprofit organizations specifically to have capacity for credit counseling, because unfortunately not everybody out there that advertises that they provide credit counseling has the person's best interest at heart. So we do want to make sure we have the appropriate capacity in those resources. Also on negotiation for payment of rent, I think we need to think through what resources will be needed there. I did think that one of the key things in the OLO report, one of their findings, of course, was that evictions cost landlords money, right? So if you can actually come up with a negotiation that's suitable to everybody, it's in the best interest of the tenant, but it may also well be in the best interest of the landlord not to have to go through an eviction and then have a vacant unit. And so I think the capacity with how we negotiate is something that we should be discussing as well, whether there isn't need for some increased resources in landlord-tenant within DHCA to handle that, I think is a good question to ask, and whether that can, needs to be in-house staff or whether it can be done through contractual. But I do think there are going to be tenants who, in order to really engage with their landlord, they're going to need some one-on-one assistance over negotiations. And then, of course, on the legal assistance, I think this does get back to the question of if you were issuing the solicitation today or you were asking people. I think that legal aid was set up around when landlord-tenant was heard and sort of the level of cases that was ongoing. But the question is, do we need resources to be available every day of the week as opposed to just 2 days a week, even if they're not located in the district court on those days, but people may be calling much more frequently. And also, I think that for tenants, we'll be with a wide range of incomes, but we do need to decide how to target it to our low-income tenants, but also to tenants who don't have English as their first language, because I think there will be a lot of need for assistance for people to understand what the court documentation will be in those other issues. So since we don't have to rush to do the FY21 non-competitive contracts, my recommendation was to take a little time, go back, look at the $218,000, potentially look at, that not being a limitation on how much funding goes into this, particularly for funding that is specifically in response to COVID, like legal assistance, the increased need for legal assistance because of these requirements. You may be able to leverage some CARES Act funding around certain aspects of this, as opposed to how you would fund your ongoing program. But I do think we're going to have some very specific responses. So my recommendation was to move forward with FY20 so we can get that to the council, get it approved, get those funds encumbered, and then to just take a little bit of time, think some more about what we might need, come back to the PHED committee in a manner in which there can be a package that the council would go to the council for approval before it goes on summer recess, so that contracts can also be in place for FY21.
Okay. All right. Thank you. Andrew, you're next.
Thanks for that. I mean, I also agree with the staff recommendation. I think that moving forward for FY21, things that are not immediate urgent needs and don't necessarily reflect the COVID environment that we're in, and have no funding at all for what I think are the urgent immediate needs, would make me uncomfortable. And also, it seemed like the director's argument is that we may need so much more than this for legal aid that we should not do anything now and potentially add a lot more money later. And I think that runs a real serious risk, given the fiscal constraints that we had, that we may end up in a more difficult circumstance, not in a better circumstance for these desperate needs. I think there's no doubt, and you're hearing from everybody here, I don't think there's any disagreement, that the needs related to The legal side of things is growing exponentially and is only going to get worse as we move forward with the economic ripples of this public health emergency and all that it means to many people, particularly those who are especially vulnerable. And if anything, I think we should, as was noted by Mr. Demarais, we should be expanding what legal aid means and what the scope of it means potentially beyond just either the days of the week that were proposed, as Ms. McMillan mentioned, or even the scope of what the legal support services means. I think that approving this based on proposals for FY20 for the year as FY21 is not the best process, doesn't reflect the COVID new reality that we're in and the challenges that residents are facing. And I think that we can be more thoughtful, more deliberate, and more in the moment of the challenges that we face if we approve the urgent need right now to get the FY20 funding out the door as quickly as possible to meet those needs and to make sure that the FY21 funding is directed towards the most urgent and most significant needs of the crisis as it currently stands.
All right, good. So we have a staff recommendation before us, and all those in favor of the staff recommendation, please raise your hand. All right, that is unanimous. Thank you very much. Again, Linda, excellent packet. Thank you for the discussion, Seem and Frank. And let's move to the next item.
Thank you.
All right. The next item is a briefing by the Planning Department on the Montgomery County Housing Needs Assessment.
And I think Lisa Gavoni is going to take you through the housing needs assessment. This is part of ongoing studies that both are for supporting the revisions to the general plan, but also the county's promise to work towards the COG goals. There are other studies ongoing, such as a preservation study, but this study came forward to the planning board during the thick of budget, and so we just wanted to make sure that we got this to you so that you have the full information that everybody else has regarding the housing needs assessment. Ms. Gavoni is going to take you through it, and Casey Anderson and Gwen Wright are also on the call. And of course, Mr. Nigam has been briefed on this as well, and so if he has comments during the discussion, you might also wish to hear from DHCA. And with that, I think I would turn it over to Lisa.
Thank you, Mrs. Mellon. Director Wright, do you want to give a brief introduction?
Thanks. Just very, very briefly, I think Linda covered really most of it. We are thick into our work on Thrive Montgomery 2050. As part of that work, we are doing a whole variety of different underlying studies to obtain data to help us develop appropriate recommendations regarding policies and actions. Housing is clearly one of our biggest concerns, one of our biggest issues to be addressed in Thrive Montgomery, and this housing needs assessment is a collection of important data that will help to inform our recommended policies and actions. I do want to emphasize that what you have in this particular study and what we're going to be going over is the data. It is not yet at where we're presenting to you policies and actions. We have actually just released some draft policies and actions to talk to the planning board about this Thursday, June 11th, and you may want to look at that staff report or tune in to the board meeting on June 11th, because we are in the the process right now of taking all of the data, not just on housing, but on other studies as well in other topic areas. But we're taking all of that data and getting to the point of recommending policies and actions. But today, and Lisa will do a great job, I'm sure, of going over and summarizing the housing needs assessment. Today, we're presenting to you the data about what we project in terms of housing needs in the county. So with that, I'll turn it over to Lisa. Thank you.
Thank you, Director. For the record, my name is Lisa Gavoni, and I'm the housing planner for the Montgomery County Planning Department. I'm pleased today to brief you on the findings from the housing needs assessment. I also want to thank DHCA for being a willing and helpful partner on this needs assessment, as they have been for current and previous studies. And so, like Director Wright said, this needs assessment provides the background necessary to develop comprehensive housing policy that meets the needs of current and future residents. The housing needs assessment will help us inform an updated set of housing principles and policies to be adopted to the general plan, as well as the update of the subdivision staging policy. And like Director Wright said, what is unique is what you will be briefed on is just data, and how we infer this data and how we use it will really come about in the general plan. And I want to caveat this all by saying when we talk about housing needs and the data that you're about to see, it's important to mention that most of it is existing conditions based on the most recent data that we have. And I would be remiss if I didn't mention that because of the pandemic, the economy seemingly changed overnight. And so when we talk about current housing need or the housing gap, that need has obviously grown. And so while we don't know the full depths of the need yet, since we're in the middle of it, the thing about this assessment that we really like is that the great consultant team of HR&A and Lisa Sturdivant will provide us with the data so that we can update it and change the data as we get better information. With that, while the focus of the preservation study today will be on housing data, there does include a lot of indicators that help inform housing policy, like population growth, income, and jobs. And I want to start off by saying this housing needs assessment is not happening in a vacuum. All of this information presented recognizes and builds upon several and ongoing studies and county efforts. So when we talk about the shifting supply gap, we're building upon that point in time supply analysis we did in the rental housing study. And when we talk about changing demographics, we're building upon the older adult housing study and the impact of changing demographics on our housing side. And when we talk about future housing needs and the type of housing we'll need, we're building on the work we did in the missing middle housing study. And we're also going to expand on trends we found in the trends report, like the huge decline in home ownership for millennials. And there's also a significant regional component of the housing needs assessment, which we're starting to realize the importance of looking at housing issues from a regional lens. And we're also going to link this to the ongoing preservation study. So first, start with population growth. Montgomery County is growing, slowly and at a decelerating rate, but we are growing. And we expect this trend to continue out to 2045. And this is really because Montgomery County has entered a mature phase of development with a slower pace of growth, typical of populous and developed county, responding to the diminishing availability of land. And while the county's population growth is expected to decline even further over the next 30 years, we still have a population that is growing and forecasted to grow. So we still need to meet the growing housing needs of our growing population.
Wait, Lisa.
Sure.
I think we should maybe talk as we go slide by slide, but I don't know how sustainable that'll be. But I thought this was very striking. We're down to 0.4% population growth expected.
Well, I think this next slide might help put it in perspective. So regionally, and we can go back, but I just want to say that regionally Montgomery County has a low capture of household growth, but that's primarily because we have a population of already of 1 million people. Similar to Fairfax County and Prince George's County, when you're starting at a high base of 1 million, it's really hard to sustain large growth over a period of time. So this kind of helps it put it in, like a regional lens. When you have places like Loudoun that are still greenfield development, they're sustaining that growth. But we developed earlier and quicker, and it's harder to sustain.
How can
you can't sustain a high percentage growth rate off a large absolute number
Understood, but even, I don't know, to me, 0.4% on a base of 1 million, I thought we were typically at about 1%. So it sounds like the new normal is about less than half of what I thought was the normal, which is about a 1% growth rate, because it was 1%, I thought, a number of years ago, but it clearly has been trending down. So it's no longer the normal. The normal is less than 0.5% of annual growth in population. That doesn't mean it's only 7 people. I mean, it's 0.5% on 1.1 million. But, right?
Right. I agree. I think the other thing is, this can change if we are obviously constrained by zoning and land, but there are, certain trends that can change if I think it's an important trend, but I also think that we have a large base. So I think
right.
Gaining a smaller
well, I mean, I guess I think a lot of things here. Like I think that the push against development has succeeded, generally speaking. The population growth isn't growing significantly. It's growing more significantly in other parts of the region. Not terribly different in Fairfax. That's good to know. But, where it is allowed, it happens. And where it is not as much allowed, it doesn't happen as much. And it's not as loud as much in Montgomery County.
Right. And I think, so there is, I'll get to this at the end, but there's a website that has a full report, and we kind of look at it this by submarket too, and you see where we're growing and where we're not. And we're growing inside the Beltway along the 270 corridor where we have, zoning capacity, where we can fit these new households that are coming. And we'll talk a little, probably, I think it's next that we'll talk about how many people we're expecting by 2045.
Okay.
So that gets to the next point is one of the things we did is we did a forecast out to 2045. And the housing needs forecast produced, they account for both demographic and future economic growth in Montgomery County. And there's several inputs into this forecast. It's forecast by job growth, by sector. And I want to point out that these forecasts have been adjusted to take into account the 2020 recession. They basically said we will not have any job growth in 2020. Now that might be actually ambitious. We could actually be losing jobs, and then we'll have to adjust this, but this is how we accounted for it at this time. We also looked at the age distribution of new workers. Sorry, my cat. We also looked at the distribution of wages by jobs and industry sector, and also household types, including the number of adults and children of workers per household. And we looked at.
I would advise you not to throw your cat off screen, even though you're not on screen right now.
I know. I have a ponytail holder, so she's trying to get it off my wrist. And we also included assumptions about tenure, owner and renter, and the housing type we expect the new households to occupy. So with that, between 2020 and 2040, Montgomery County is expected to add about over 60,000 new households. And this includes both working and non-working households. Specifically, we're talking about new residents. This number is a little bit more ambitious than our COG number by about 3,000 households, which is about a little less than 200 a year. So it's not significantly different, but I just wanted to flag that. And the forecast assumptions about the distribution of housing types across incomes and households suggest that the need for single-family ownership for new households will be significantly lower than the current share of housing that is currently single-family owner-occupied.
Okay, wait. This is an important slide. I just want to make sure this sinks in. So you're projecting to add over 60,000 households in the next 20 years.
Yes.
What did the COG goal call for?
So the COG goal is a 10-year goal that was based on our share of the regional forecast. And so that was about 59,000 households we were expecting. And so we need to build an additional 10,000 household units. This is not in conflict with the COG housing goal. This is just saying we actually might have more households than the COG number is saying. So we actually might need to build more housing than we originally anticipated.
Okay. And you expect over 50% to be multifamily renters.
Correct. But I do want to flag the multifamily owner, and that really gets into that missing middle type of housing that we're talking about. It includes condominiums, but it also includes things like triplexes and quads. They might be a more affordable home ownership component, and we'll talk about the need for home ownership in a couple of slides, but I think that's important to flag that ownership is still a very important part of Montgomery County. It's important for wealth building, and so we need to build both. But future trends show that we will be building a lot of rental multifamily units.
Wow. So this is very significant. This is a lot of new housing that is needed.
Yes.
Also the hardest kind of housing to build. To me, one of the key lessons of the last 20, 30 years is that our county has prioritized infill development, multifamily in already more urbanized areas. And it is actually a lot more difficult to build that than it seems. And so we don't get very much. Our annual production of housing is far below our demand. Even though the market would like to work itself out and meet the demand, it appears that the market isn't able to do that. And I think it's because of all the costs and restrictions and timelines and that just add and add and add to the risk level of building that housing.
Right. And the consultant did look 5 years back and said, our annual production of about 2,600 units per year for the past 5 years, we're likely producing less housing than what we need to support our employment-driven housing demand. So we really need the housing production to pick up to not only meet the needs of the people that live here, but the people that we want to move here to meet the forecasted need.
I mean, this is the issue. Like, we have to own our decision to close the door on greenfield development. When we close the door on building in the ag reserve, we would have tens of thousands. You can see how fast it's going up in Clarksburg. It's very quick and efficient and easy and less expensive to build large subdivisions on raw ground. But when you have to negotiate with buy property, go through everything that you have to do with these multifamily buildings, it just takes a lot longer and it's a lot more expensive and it's a lot slower. And so we aren't getting the housing that we think we can get or we wanted. And I think we have to account for that in our general housing strategy and recognize that it's harder and more expensive to build the kind of housing that we want built. So, okay, please continue.
So one of the central themes of the housing needs assessment is idea that we call this bifurcated growth. And what this means is that we're really growing at two extremes. So since 2010, household growth in Montgomery County has been concentrated in the lowest and highest ends of income distribution. This includes households earning under $25K and households earning over $125,000 a year. These trends could be due to various factors, including households increasing their income or lower income households moving to the county. And to put a fine point on this, since 2010, about half of all new households to Montgomery County are earning less than $50,000 a year. So while in 2018, households earning less than $50,000 a year comprise less than a third of total households, this group has been growing the most rapidly over the past decade. This indicates that while high-income households remain the largest group and there's increasing need for market rate affordable housing, there's a growing need to build and preserve affordable housing to accompany this shifting demographics.
What is a new household, Lisa?
And the new households is people that move here.
People that move here. Okay, so it's not retirement. People who were earning more and now they're earning less.
Right.
Okay.
And to put another point on this, regionally we are capturing an outside share of this low-income housing growth, and we are the only county that this is true. Only large county, I should say. Fairfax and Prince George's are adding low-income households at lower proportions than their existing shares. And DC is actively losing low-income residents, likely displacing them into these adjacent counties, namely Montgomery County.
Isn't just to chime in here, since that's called gentrification, right? Let's just for the layman, and on that point, obviously, if you could go back to the last slide, Lisa, for a second, we're growing. You called it the barbell. So we're growing at both ends, obviously faster at the low income end, but we are growing on the high income end.
Yes, and one other point we'll get to is that because we're growing at those two ends, we're kind of masking a lot of issues like cost burdening.
Right.
It looks like it's declining, but really we're adding on net and growing at the top, so it's masking kind of a lot of the low income growth.
Yeah, and obviously everyone in between is getting squeezed as well, but the low income, so it's, yeah, that's a good point. And what are the raw number? How do I see how many? So like in last year, how many did we add in each category, as far as a number?
I don't have the number on me, but I can send you that. We do have that.
Okay. But do you know over the last couple of years, what's the average that you add in each category? Is just kind of from the top of your head, even if it's not exactly right?
I don't know. I don't want to tell you the wrong number, but I do have that, and I can.
I just think that's something to think about. A lot of times in the schools process, we talk about we're adding 2,000 new students a year or whatever. Just the raw number. The percentages are important, but the raw number is important too. So okay, thank you.
So back to this slide. So what's happening is DC, this is not the only phenomenon, but
right.
Some folks are leaving DC and they're moving into Montgomery County and other adjacent counties. And hopefully they will have a better life here. But okay.
And that's one of the things we talked about is I think it also, a lot of, you could look at this and say, there are issues with, as we are growing county, we are going to be coming up with we're going to be dealing with these more complex issues. But I do think it highlights what a great place Montgomery County is, that people want to move here for our schools, our great quality of life, our amenities. And so you can look at it at both ways. So there's a lot of opportunity here too.
Yeah, I mean, it's exactly, it's two sides of the coin, right? You had a situation where poverty was more concentrated and segregation was, very significant. Segregation is still significant, but why should DC have to, the region, low-income residents should be able to live throughout the region and get access to school systems throughout the region, for example. So, I think that I think it's something we have to grapple with because it means that our long-term revenue base is going to change a little bit and our need for services is going to change and so on. But hopefully folks who are moving here are finding that they're glad that they did. I can't speak, I don't know, but okay.
All right, so this is the future forecast of income. And we really expect this barbell income growth to continue. So we're expected to gain low and high income households. And this is based on the wages of new jobs. We expect the number of workers per household, along with the income of non-working households. It's expected that the greatest share of new households between 2020 and 2040 will have incomes between $25,000 and $50,000 and over $125,000. So,
before you leave this one, if I could chime in, do you have this mapped against? And knowing you, Lisa, it's probably the next slide. Against where the people are living, because to the point of segregation, I imagine I can put in my head where that top end is going and where the low end is going.
So while this is not in this presentation, we do this by market segmentation, so that is in the final report that I can send you that shows that it's where you think, and it's kind of interesting is that we see kind of some displacement of people near transit to the census tracts immediately behind them. So they're slowly moving out from the transit proximate census tracts. And so we're seeing concentrations of low-income households moving farther away from transit into areas like Montgomery Village was one that was highlighted. So it's what you think is happening, but it is very interesting to see by census tract, and I can send that along.
Well, it just gives us a big challenge that we want to, we don't want to. That's why you need to have affordable housing, to Councilman Reamer's point, everywhere, so that we can reduce that type of segregation. But it's hard to accomplish, and but it also underscores the point that this is a great place to live because you have all types of people that come here to live, but how do we minimize the inequality? So it is our challenge, but it's also our opportunity. Thank you.
Yeah, I agree with that too. I wanted to just add one other point. I mean, 125,000 and above is a big range in a place with our cost of living. In terms of, if we're talking about the median home price or the median rental price of a 3-bedroom unit or a townhouse, et cetera, in terms of a family, even at 130,000 just above that, that's a big difference from somebody who's way above 130, 140,000. And so I think the segmentation of this also is a little bit, I think, somewhat misleading as well. I mean, it helps to frame this particular issue, but in terms of the point that Councilmember Jawanda made earlier about squeezing, and other folks squeezing. I mean, there's plenty of families in Montgomery County at $130,000, $140,000, $150,000 median income with two incomes and children that are still not comfortably able to find a home to purchase anywhere in the county. And so I think that should be part of this conversation as well. And that used to always be kind of the bread and butter of Montgomery County, two professionals with children and a family who wanted good schools and good parks and good quality of life. And I just think, this tells a really important story, something critical that we need to make sure that we see. But we also have to understand what $125,000 means in Montgomery County based on the current cost of our housing and of, cost of living.
That's a great point. And we're going to get to, I think it's a couple slides, and I'm going to show you about what household income can buy you. And hint, it's not the average home in Montgomery County that I think really puts a fine point on this. And like I said, in the final deliverable, we'll have some market segmentation to see, where we have existing affordable housing and where we don't. And it's very eye-opening. And so just to look at this by AMI, we expect that about a third of new households in Montgomery County will have incomes of over 100% AMI, and about 25% will have incomes under 50% AMI. And that really just highlights that we need to build market housing, but we do have a growing need to build and figure out how to build affordable housing for households under 50% AMI.
Which, by the way, the market cannot do.
The market cannot do, but
you cannot produce new housing below 50% AMI. It must be subsidized one way or the other.
But at what level is the question?
Always. I think the answer is enough to get it produced.
So I'm going to very briefly talk about how this compares to the Urban Institute forecast. And I'm going to state that it's impossible to do a perfect direct comparison because of how we defined and Urban defined income categories. So this is a very rough estimate that suggests that we will see higher growth in the higher income households than the Urban Institute suggested. And I do want to say that forecasting is always difficult under the best of circumstances. It's not an exact science. It's always based on assumptions and methodology. But what we're saying is that they're not wrong, but that our methodology is different. And this is the forecast that we have chosen to endorse for our general plan. We got to play with a little bit of the data. We're working with the consultant and add a little bit more nuance that we could working at the county level compared to the regional level. And so I just wanted to bring this to your attention. And
tell it what you're saying, that the Urban Institute forecast is the one that you agree with? No,
we're saying this forecast that I just showed you, the current one that we Lisa Sturdivant provided for us, is the one that we are using for the general plan. And they both show a dire need for affordable housing. It's just where they break out is different. So I just wanted to highlight that for you.
Okay. So you're seeing a little bit less growth in the lowest income, for example.
Yes.
Okay.
And could you just explain that quickly? That I'm not sure I quite understood the difference between what the planning department is using and what the Urban Institute proposes.
Sure. So, all right. So the forecast provided to us by Lisa Sturdivant and Associates and Urban Institute, they use similar data, but the methodology that they used to arrive at the forecast were different. So there's obviously there's nuances in forecasts. It's not an exact science because we don't know what's going to happen in the future, but we're saying the methodology and some of the assumptions were different. So we arrived at a slightly different number. But we felt that it was important to show you just because there's a lot of discussion about the Urban Institute forecast. And going forward for our general plan and subdivision staging efforts, we are using the forecast provided to us by Lisa Sturdivant because one, we helped control the variables that went into it. And two, we also have the ability to change this forecast because we are getting the product. So we can adjust for COVID-related economic variation. So
I'm all for having a localized focus on the projections. I think that that's helpful and important. I appreciate seeing the difference here, but it would be helpful to get in writing, not right now, but in writing, just what the differences were in the methodologies and in the projections and how you ended up there. I mean, you know, even if it's technical by nature, just something in writing that allows us to understand, because I hear everything that you're saying. I read what's on the chart, but it's not clear how we arrived at the different conclusion. And I'm sure it's legitimate and I'm sure it makes a lot of sense, but it would just be helpful to understand it a little bit better.
Sure, it is very technical, so it would be helpful. I'll write it out for the council and I'll send it to McMillan to send it around.
If you could do that, thank you. But again, the takeaway here is, first of all, you think we need more housing than COG, which I think was Urban Institute generated. But secondly, the takeaway is more of it will be market, essentially, than they had predicted.
Yes.
A little less will be substantially below market. So that puts more of a need. You know, it informs us that we have to be pursuing policies that allows the market to produce housing at the same time as we are seeking subsidized construction of new affordable housing that is set aside at these AMI levels.
Correct.
Okay, thank you.
So back to this barbelled income growth, and this, like I was saying to Councilmember Germondo earlier, this explains why the number of cost burden renters has increased on net. The percentage of renter households that are cost burden has decreased over the same time. So we're really masking that growth by growing at the top end. So I think it's, you know, it's just important to show that, like Councilmember Germondo said, showing percentages is important, but we also need to look at the net increase that we're seeing at the same time. And so one of the biggest things that we asked for in this housing needs assessment was to really build on that supply gap analysis that was completed in the rental housing study, which was a point in time based on the information that we had on rents in 2014. And it didn't have a lot of nuance about where our subsidized units fell and the implications of that on our housing supply. And this is also in response to similar work that has been done by Alexandria and Arlington that suggested that they've lost about 90% of their market rate affordable housing supply, and that mostly due to rent increases. So we wanted to look at it over time too. So in 2014, we faced about a 6,000 unit gap for households earning 60% AMI. And then we looked at it 5 years later in 2019, and that gap had worsened. So between 2014 and 2018, the housing gap worsened for households earning under 65% AMI.
Okay, wait. This is very interesting because as I recall the county executive saying that we didn't need to build more housing at 65% of AMI, that millennials would, you know, who might be at that income level didn't really have a housing problem. This doesn't seem to really support that point of view.
Right. I mean, this is showing that in 5 years, we've lost that 5,700 unit surplus we had at 65% that we show in the rental housing study is now 800 units. So we've almost lost 5,000 units in 5 years. A lot of that is because of filtering up. Rents are becoming more expensive, and it's really not because of redevelopment. We really haven't seen a lot of redevelopment. It's mostly because of natural market increases. And so for the under 50% AMI household, this growth in this already shallow pool is outpacing supply. And most of these households under 50% AMI are occupying a unit that is unaffordable to them. They are in the 65% AMI range, occupying a unit. And then,
Lisa, just on that point, so the growth, obviously the demand for the lower income unit is far exceeds the supply, and that has gotten worse over time.
Yes.
Yeah, and could you just talk about that? For example, the spread like you did with the 65%. So the gap is the 24,000. That's that number on the left.
Right. Correct.
Okay.
So we're about 50,000 units short under 50% AMI. So the gap has actually increased. If you look back, that the demand increased, but the supply. So.
But based on the other numbers, I mean, doesn't this also suggest? I mean, looking at the chart this way almost suggests that the supply is static, but at the lower end of the costs, those are older units generally, I would assume, and that's where the market dynamics have the most impact. And if you have more supply overall in a functioning economic environment, those units would lower in cost because there would be a greater supply, better connection between supply and demand for those units. The more expensive units are newer, and so the flexibility of cost is more narrow, and the older units that had been held for a long time, the costs, a higher proportion of those costs have been paid off most likely, and so the flexibility would be greater, right?
Correct. And, one of the things is I want to point to the surplus that we have over 80%. That's completely normal. That's similar to basically every other county in the country. And so what, like Councilmember Friedman is saying, is under 50%, the demand is there, but the supply is very shallow. In the next slide, I'm going to talk about where our income restricted units fall. And it's actually, I think helpful to put that into context because we do have a lot, which helps. So does anyone have anything else on the slide before I turn over to deed restricted units?
No, I just want to reiterate, I mean, to me, this chart screams a lack of total supply of housing.
You're right. And looking at it by market segmentation too, you see where we are adding new supply, the older units aren't competing. We actually see filtering up in places of the county where we're not adding a lot of supply because there's nothing for those older apartments to compete with. They're not competing with the new rents or the new buildings. They have the market to themselves, so they can charge what the market will bear. So it is, Montgomery County, this chart is helpful to a point, but it really does not show the market segmentation that we see in the county also.
Right, and one last question on this chart. How do you determine demand? I mean, I think demand is easier to understand in lower income brackets based specifically on income and a healthy, rental affordability. But for the higher end, the up to 120%, is it based on the same? Is that just based on renters? Is that based on all market participants? Because at that point, some people maybe are a potential home buyer.
Sure. So this is just based on renters and it is based on income. So what we are seeing though is an increase in the number of high income households participating in the rental market too, likely because of, this indicator of 30% of your income is not fully demonstrative of your transportation, your school loans, all of those costs that make it harder, as well as the supply in Montgomery County. So it's just an important part that shows, the picture of who's occupying the rental market.
And we have some people in the county who have done very well in their homes who are aging, who may not, but their home at the value that they did where they accumulated wealth over the last 30 or 40 years does not allow them to similarly participate in a condo or a townhouse or some type of downsize. And so they may be going, their income may be high, but it may not totally reflect. So they may be moving from home ownership to the rental market as well, I would think.
Correct. So with that, I want to, couch that last slide by saying, a simple supply demand analysis can mask a lot of the nuances of housing supply, which I think all of the council members, sufficiently brought up. But I do want to say when we talk about that supply gap for units at the lower income, the good news is a lot of those units are deed restricted, and we really aren't in a lot of danger due to GHE being so proactive of losing them to rising rents. So deed restricted units make over 40% of our units under 65% AMI, and 1 out of every 5 rental units in our rental supply is income restricted. When we say deed restricted, that also does not include vouchers. It also does not include the MPDUs at 70% AMI. So there is, even part of that number is That number is actually higher. So while we say that the affordable housing isn't going anywhere, we do want to look at new tools to the preservation study and the general plan to build more housing at this income range and how to combat rising rents for the market rate affordable properties.
Hey, I just want to say, when you talk about filtering, I don't really like that word. I think it's far too of a complex, abstract framing for anyone to understand. But I think of it as aging, basically. That as housing ages, it becomes more affordable. Is that a reasonable approximation?
Yes.
And so, I would say, in addition to building new subsidized or deed restricted affordable housing, we've got to build new market housing so that the older market housing can become more affordable through the process of older housing is just more affordable. Is that also a takeaway here? Yeah.
I think so.
Yeah, I mean, what you're saying is exactly right. And I think that it bears really putting a fine point on it. I mean, Lisa had said redevelopment is not what's driving the increase in cost and the increased competition for units at the lower end of price. In fact, it's the opposite. It's the failure to produce enough new units that interferes with that process of filtering down. So instead you get what she called was filtering up. You get so much competition for units that, units are getting, in some cases, rehabilitated or spruced up. In some cases, it's just people with a little bit higher incomes are competing for units that they wouldn't otherwise have considered if they had a choice of where they could live. But since we haven't produced enough housing, the competition is more intense for all the housing. And of course, the people who have the least money are the ones who come out with the short end of the stick.
Yeah, and I just say, I agree with everything that's been said. I agree with you, Councilmember Reamer, that filtering, it doesn't, I don't think really says what it is intending to say. I understand that's the term of art, but I would call it functioning. The reason why this isn't, doesn't happen the way that it should is because we don't have a functioning housing market. We're not building enough units to keep pace. And so the demands far outpace the supply. And we've been doing that for, basically 25 years or longer. And because of that, we, run into the situation that we're in. It should be that a unit that's 20 to 30 years old is just naturally occurring affordable. We shouldn't have to subsidize those units for workforce housing. We should be subsidizing to well below, workforce housing. Right now, we basically have to subsidize to workforce housing because we don't have enough housing to meet the needs of our residents because we're not building enough. And we haven't been for a long time.
If I could chime in here just on this point, it can't multiple things be true here, Lisa, that, and I've got my girls in the background they're building their own affordable housing. But the fact that, the supply issue, if you just build a whole bunch of high-rise multifamily one bedroom with a couple 2 bedrooms that are very expensive, that the idea that that's going to filter down, or whatever the term you want to use, in a period of time quickly enough to be available to people who are income burdened or need more affordable housing. Did you guys look at that at all? Because obviously, I agree we need more supply, we need different types of housing, but the issue of where you're going to build it and how you're going to build it, how that plays in with the supply question.
Right. I think you're right that I think it's a lot of things. It's, the filtering or the aging process. It's also like Councilmember Reamer says, we're never going to be able to build a unit for 50% AMI. The likelihood that we even get something that filters down to that low range under 50 it's hard. So it's a combination of factors that I think are in play when we talk about our housing supply.
Okay, thank you.
So I just want final takeaway for me is, just reemphasizing to me that you've got to have a housing market that's producing enough new housing for it to, over time, provide more affordable housing. And And so we just always have to be mindful. We want to also produce new restricted income housing. And we have a variety of tools to do that, and we can do more. But we also just have to be mindful not to prevent the market from producing new market rate housing. And new market rate housing is inherently valuable, and it must be supported. Like, we've got to have a functioning, healthy housing market, and our regulations and our policies have a huge impact on that. So I just think philosophically, we've got to both embrace market housing and a healthy, robust producing market, and tools that will generate new set-aside housing. And then I think to Councilmember Juwanda's point, it all fits together. You get new affordable housing produced, and then you also have affordable housing being essentially generated through the aging of the housing stock.
Right. So when we talk about this point of subsidized housing, overall the county has actually been gaining subsidized rental housing at a faster rate than it's being lost. Since 2000, we've lost probably about 500 units of subsidized rental housing, but most of those units are in the Section 8 units within larger market rate properties, and most of what's being built is MPDUs. And like you said, that's an important part. We don't get MPDUs unless we build new housing. They are, intrinsically linked, so we need both. And so, based on the risk assessment that our consultants provided, there are about 1,400 subsidized units that are at risk when their subsidies expire over the next 2 decades. But I do want to highlight that, since 2000, GHC has done a great job of implementing preservation strategies for subsidized rental housing that was at risk of being lost. They've saved approximately almost 2,000 units from being lost, and that's, something that's, I think, very worthy of them. And I think, while that number seems high, I think our GHA is up for the task, and if their past history shows anything.
They do a great job, absolutely. I think your average resident does not know this story, right? I think we'll just assume the worst.
Well, I think the other thing is, preservation is, it's much harder to show. There's no ribbon cutting ceremony when you preserve 5 units and, you preserve 5 MPDUs. There's a ribbon cutting for those new buildings that are being built, but a lot of the affordable housing work that we do, our GHC does, is, through preservation agreements. And so it's just not as highlighted as much. And so when we talk about deed restricted units, the vast majority of them, like most jurisdictions have been built, are from the low income housing tax credit program. But since 2000, we're seeing this change where we're seeing most of the deed restricted rental units are MPDUs. And this is, important because most jurisdictions, this is not the case. I would say the 99% of jurisdictions, the vast majority of their affordable housing being built is through the low income housing tax credit or another state or federal program. For Montgomery County, this is our own local program that is really building affordable housing. And when we talk about, the declining, why we're declining for the low income housing tax credit, it can be, there's a lot of reasons. It's the state and federal resources are declining, they're shifting QAP priorities, and there's also another side of it where since 2000, our MPDUs being built are primarily rental MPDUs. As we're shifting from that greenfield to infill development, we're getting more MPDUs that are rental.
That's great. I mean, that means the MPDU program is one of our most important ways of generating new affordable housing.
Right, and I would be remiss if I didn't mention, 1/3 of our MPDUs do serve households under, 50% AMI. They're an important part of our affordable housing strategy to provide housing for households under 50% AMI.
This is Gwen. It also means that in many ways, I believe Montgomery County is not getting its fair share of the low-income housing tax credits, which are allocated on a statewide basis. And I think we should be getting more low-income housing tax credit projects in Montgomery County. I think it's a really important tool.
I totally agree on the low-income tax credits. The 9% competitive credits are a game changer. It's why I raised it when our new director came on board. He was in Virginia when Northern Virginia worked with their state legislature to ensure that there was a separate pool of money specifically for Northern Virginia, understanding the housing challenges that were most acute in that part of their state and the challenges to housing costs. And we have the exact same dynamic on our side of the river in the DC market with Prince George's and Montgomery County, along with with others as well. And I talk repeatedly with Director Nigam about this, and I absolutely think we need to work with our state partners to have a similar fund dedicated to the DC region to address the specific and acute housing challenges that we have here, because they're desperately needed.
Yep.
And so shifting a little bit to talking about from income restricted to naturally occurring affordable housing. Since 2000, the consultant team estimated that we've probably lost around 20,000 units, which is about 1,000 a year, which seems a lot, and there should be intervention, but it's not nearly as dire as it is for our friends in Alexandria and Arlington. And most of them are being lost, not to redevelopment. There's really only been 6 instances of redevelopment, and 2 of them were by HOC for Chevy Chase Lake and MHP for the Bonifant. So really, we're losing these units because of rising rents.
Okay. I just have to interject here because the county executive has made some false claims that this is a problem, that there's some preponderance of affordable housing that's being lost to redevelopment, that buildings are being knocked down to be replaced by, high income, affluent apartment buildings. It's just not happening. It's not true. That's a totally false statement.
We really don't see evidence of that trend. That doesn't mean that we shouldn't be cognizant of future trends that may happen, especially in the purple line. But as of right now, most of the units being lost are being lost to rents increasing. And I want to.
Lisa, can I just ask one question there? I think that last point you made is critically important. Two points you made. One, we're just losing it because rents are rising in the older. They're just rising, right? It's not being redeveloped. They're just raising the rents, right? Because of the market. And so, which I mean is and if those same buildings were to be redeveloped, i.e., somewhere along a purple line stop, we would assume that to do that those rents would be even higher, correct?
Correct. I think, but I will say that one of the, the great things that the council has done is when these properties have come up in places, Veers Mill, we've done no net loss strategy so that if they were redeveloped, we wouldn't be losing affordable housing. We would actually, be gaining market and keeping our affordable housing. So I think it highlights the importance of the strategies that we're doing and how we need to continue them.
Yeah. You brought up a sore wound there on Veers Mill. I think we could have gotten a lot more out of that than we did. No net loss is a good start, but but we'll see. Time will tell. But thank you. I agree. I just want to point out that even if you're not redeveloping, raising rents causes its own sets of issues when wages don't increase. As well. So
right, but I just think Councilmember Joanna brought up the key point. The most important word you just said, Councilmember, is market. And the reason why the rents are going up in the older units is because of the market. The reason why in older unit the rents go up faster than the pace of wages is because we're not building enough units to keep pace with the number of new residents. And so that is the absolute function of supply and demand. That marketplace is exclusively a function of, are we building housing at a rate that keeps pace with the folks who are desiring housing? And, I've said it before, I'll say it again, housing policy is our wall. I mean, that is our immigration policy. We don't handle immigration policy at the county level, but we do handle housing policy, which determines who can live here and where they can live. And so I think that it's important that we talk about that. If we don't build enough housing, then we are displacing residents by a function of the rents that the market is creating, and we'll never be able to buy up and subsidize enough of those units to be able to fix the challenge. We need to incentivize the market and then subsidize on the margins where we can to help the most vulnerable.
Yep, and we need to support the production of housing. And I strongly disagree with my colleague's comment about Veers Mill. I think we got one of the best deals that's ever been negotiated through a master plan. And I don't think there was any opportunity to squeeze more blood out of that stone at all. I think looking at the Purple Line corridor, we are going to need to generate a lot of new housing there to keep the pressure down on existing and come up with new no net loss strategies. I think that should be the framework, is no net loss, but I think we should also recognize that we're going to be paying the price of 20, 30 years, 50 years really, of a lack of development around Purple Line stations, and that meaning that there's a very constrained supply there to absorb increasing demand. And so we've got to both kind of shake that loose, but proceed in a way that allows us to save what we have. Okay.
If I could just say, since
Sure.
I got tagged double teamed there, I don't disagree, and you guys know this. I'm not in the boat of that we don't need to build more housing. We do need to build more housing. I'm very clear on that. Where I tend to be more alone on this committee is that we also need to have more requirements of affordability and push that as far as we can, because if a no net loss strategy, if you take the Veers Mill plan, or the one that the biggest issue we discussed, you had a unit going from 500 units or so, and over the next 15, 20 years, again, I'm going to track this over time and see what happens here so I can write my thesis. It's going to go up to 2,000 or plus units, and if we don't get any additional affordable units, that's not, in my view, good enough. And so when you're getting a ×4 on what could be produced on that property through upzoning and what we ended up allowing. So I just think we have to do it on both ends. Yes, more supply, but also really push on the affordability. And I just think that's where we kind of, I don't know if we're doing all we can. So, I respect my colleagues, but, it'll be, the discussion continues.
And I will get the last word as the chair. I mean, you have to have the market be able to produce the housing that you want. So when do you push it too far versus when have you pushed it just to the right point? I think you are of the mind that it could be pushed a lot further. I look at the Veers Mill plan, and I think the private sector has never volunteered to do this, in my knowledge, ever. So clearly we must have done something pretty extraordinary. And your comment is, no, we should have done more. And, there has never been a private sector building with 30% set aside in deed restricted units without subsidy. All we were doing is providing a little land. So I think we crushed it there. You disagree. I understand that. But the conversation continues. It will never end, apparently, which is fine.
Yeah, could I just quickly say the one point that I want to make, and I did not reference Veers Mill specifically, and I didn't think that anything that I said was a dispute or a disagreement. I thought I was actually agreeing with colleagues that, we need to fix the market. We haven't built enough supply, which has created a market pressure that isn't helping. What we do in addition to that is a question in how much is enough, and what will work and what won't work, and what are the fiscal and economic realities. I think those are important substantive points, and we've had them a lot here, which I think is good and healthy, and I think is how the process is supposed to work and what residents expect us to have, which I really do appreciate. I will just say on the issue of Veers Mill, since it's now come up and been talked about, I agree that I think we got a very historic and significant agreement there, and I'm very proud of the work that we were able to do on that, and I think we shouldn't lose sight of that. But I think the other piece of it, as it's being analyzed and tracked, as I heard my colleague say, who will make sure he's doing, which I believe and think is important, the status quo is important too, because the question is, what would happen if you don't build any more units? And by building 4 times the number of units, maintaining the number of restricted units, one, those are being guaranteed affordable, which they currently aren't and weren't, prior to that. And so they would have naturally gone up. And if you have fewer units, the pressure on the rents being raised, as we heard earlier, that proves the point. As we were talking about earlier, Beers Mill is a perfect example of the fact that it's not knocking down of buildings that is causing the price pressure at the lowest rent buildings and the oldest units. It's the pressure of the market. And by not adding 4 times in transit accessible areas where BRT is going to be along the Purple Line in other areas, by not finding the right balance of keeping what we currently have, restricting it to make sure that it stays that way, and then increasing the supply dramatically, you all but guarantee that you don't have to knock a building down to displace affordability elsewhere. And that is what we ought to be avoiding. That's what I think was the really successful aspect of the Beers Mill plan. And I'm hopeful that we can bottle up what we were able to do there and spread it out to other places of the county, specifically including the Purple Line corridor.
If I could just say one more thing, you're going to have to get another last word, Councilman Reamer, since Andrew popped back in. This is all I'll say. I hope we have another chance. I agree with you that was a historic opportunity. Rarely do you have what we had. You had the mix of public land involved. You had the mix of significant ability to upzone, to allow the folks to quadruple, in the case of Alpine View, quadruple the amount of housing over the next 10 to 15 years. And so you had this enormous opportunity. And I'm, negotiations 101. I know I'm the lawyer on the council, but you guys are negotiators too. If the first offer from a private sector partner is the one that we accept, which is what happened.
That's not what happened. Please don't represent that. That is not what happened.
Or the close to the first offer that was presented to me when I met with them.
Because you didn't talk to them in time. Okay.
Okay, even if it was the 1.2 or 1.3 offer, I'm just saying that is not the farthest someone can go when you're going from 500 units to 2,500 units, and you're getting public land, and so I just, I think the average person listening, on the record here, it was a great deal, but we could have gotten more out of it.
Okay, I think unfortunately the average person listening right now is rolling their eyes at all of us, and I understand that.
Probably.
But I'll take the last word. We got more deed restricted units through that redevelopment strategy than we currently have units. So we went from 0 to over 500 deed restricted units, which is very significant. And I think that's the end of the story. We went from 0 to 30% of the development, more units deed restricted in the future than even there are market right now. So and it was not their first offer at all. And I know that because I asked them, if we're going to provide you with the right of way, return the right of way to you that is frankly only valuable to the owner of this property, you're going to have to do a lot more. And they agreed to do that. So that's okay, let's keep going.
All right, so very quickly, and I will take the full responsibility for bringing up Beers Mill.
Yeah, right.
When we talk about risk factors for losing market rate affordable housing or naturally occurring affordable housing, the biggest risk factor is size and age, obviously. So smaller buildings, they tend to be more affordable and at the greatest risk for redevelopment, and also the greatest risk of rent increases when prices around them rise. So one of the interesting things is we asked them to look at the correlation between rehabilitation, rehabbing, and rent growth, and the concentration of properties that have undergone significant renovation does not actually perfectly correlate with rent trends. So we see a little sub-market segmentation here. So rehabilitated properties correlate most likely to the loss of naturally occurring affordable housing, and sub-markets closer to the Beltway, where in other sub-markets up county, there doesn't seem to be a clear correlation. On average, properties that underwent rehabilitation, the rent growth peaked about 2 years after renovation, but rent growth then fell down pretty close back to average or sharply below average post renovations 2 years later. So not a lot of correlation there. And then one of the other things that we found is that property ownership is obviously a big indicator with the loss of market rate affordable housing, especially when a big property owner buys these smaller buildings. They are very likely to correlate with rent growth. And then obviously the last one is proximity to transit. Proximity to transit and new transit infrastructure is the strongest indicator for increase in assessed land values and rent growth, although there's obviously a lot of zoning and other factors that are compounding variables in this. And so, we always have to have this chart in every presentation we do about this, but it's important because, we've talked about the strength of the MPDU program, and we need that MPDU program because we need new development too. We need both. We really need to grow our housing supply to not only relieve pressure on our rents, but also to build more MPDUs. And in the wake of declining federal and state resources to build affordable housing, the MPDUs is our best way to get affordable units at this time. They also, like I said, 1/3 of them do meet those lower income households below MPD rent. So they are a very important part of our affordable housing inventory, and we need to couple that with building more housing overall. So I'm going to pivot to home ownership because I think, we talk a lot about rentals and, rental MPDUs, but, Councilmember Friesen, alluded to this point earlier, and home ownership is, the biggest path to wealth building for households in the country. I don't think there's anyone disputing that, but owning is currently unattainable to most of Montgomery County. The average household in Montgomery County cannot afford the average house in Montgomery County. The household income required to afford the median home value in Montgomery County is about $125K, but the actual median income is only around $110. So there's about 15%, $15,000 difference. And I think that's important because we need both. We need to build more rental housing, but we also need to create pathways to home ownership moving forward. And that I think comes a lot with the missing middle discussion and condos and just building more diverse housing types. And when we couple that and when we talk about who can afford to buy a house in Montgomery County, it's not surprising that the only household income segment that's adding owners on net post-recession is households earning over $150K. That's pretty comparable age-wise, where the only age bracket adding owners on net is the 55+ cohort. So we're not seeing youngers, millennials buying houses, and we're really not seeing a lot of people adding to household ownership on net. And I couch that by saying, rental households are also much more mobile. And this is especially true in lower income. So most renters in Montgomery County move a lot. 1/3 of all rental units in Montgomery County turn over every year. And if you think about it, if you're low income and you're already in a unit that you can't afford, when that rent increase comes at the end of your lease that you already can't afford, you're likely to move. And this has a lot of implications for things like stability. And when we look at it on the inverse, we see that owner income households have lived on their units, most of them for over 10 years. So there's just a lot of discrepancies between renter and homeowner households in terms of mobility. And that leads into this other idea, as we talked about bifurcation by income, but we're also talking about bifurcation between renter and homeownership households. So 1 in 7 renter households in Montgomery County is overcrowded, lives in overcrowded housing conditions. And it's really income. It's not family size. It's not unit size that drives it. It's income that drives to the unit that people live in. And I think, at planning board, we talked about the reality that this number is probably actually much larger than what we know. People are not going to tell the ACS or the census that they're living in overcrowded conditions. So we see a trend from people that report, but the reality is it's much larger than what we think it is. So it's just a trend that we're aware of that I think we all know, but it's much larger than we think. And, when we look at this, on the extreme, we have large low-income households that are squeezed into small units. And small high-income households can access and occupy large units that the low-income households cannot.
Well, it's a longer conversation, but this is obviously a problem in the COVID crisis. I mean, it's I think we have long looked the other way, essentially on crowding, recognizing that the lack of supply, or that there are few alternatives for households other than crowding to make it work here. And you know, I think that that has a downside when it comes to a contagious disease like we're experiencing now. So it's a very difficult situation.
Right. And then when we look on the inverse, 1 in 3 owner occupieds are actually what we called overhouse. That means if there's a 1-person household, they have a 3-bedroom household. And, you know, no judgment. You know, I personally would like to be overhoused right now and during quarantine. But, you know, I think it's just highlighting this mismatch of our supply and the households that live here. Because overhousing is driven by, you know, we see it commonly in areas that are low density, they're aging, and they have a lot of wealth. And we see, and these are areas that we highlighted in the market designations like Olney, Damascus, Potomac, and it's not really something that we see in places like Silver Spring. So it's just highlighting this bifurcation of the different living conditions of renter and owner households.
I mean,
So,
I think that's really important, Lisa, just real quick, that, you know, it's underscoring, again, the deep inequity and segregation, both geography and income, that we have in America, but as Montgomery County is a microcosm, this is the danger, and the numbers you showed earlier with the barbell. I mean, if we don't do something different, that this will continue to go this way. And so, as far as types of housing, supply, you know, requirements on development, the whole range of tools, we're going to have a new vision.
So this is kind of the last area, and I'm going to end on job growth. And I'm not going to belabor this point to death because I think the PHED committee has obviously talked about this a lot. But our job growth post-recession has lagged the region and the nation. The post-recession job growth has been largely driven by microeconomic growth and industry strength, and not necessarily our regional competitiveness. So the chart you're looking at is a shift share, which is a regional analysis method that attempts to determine how much of a regional job growth can be attributed to national trends and how much is due to unique regional factors. So when the total shift is how much a specific industry grew from 2008 to 2018, and the industrial mix effect represents the share of the regional growth explained by that industry's growth at the national level. And so then when we look at the regional competitive effect, it's the most important factor of the 3 indicators, and it explains how much of a change in an industry is due to some unique competitive advantage that area possesses, because job growth cannot be explained, basically the growth cannot be explained by national trends in the industry or the economy as a whole. So you can see that all of the red is basically saying we are not that competitive regionally or countywide for these growing shift sectors. And then when we look at it this way, the post-recession job growth has largely been driven by microeconomic growth and industry strength and not by our regional competitiveness. So we look at, where we're growing due to strong industry, strong national economy, and our regional competitiveness is transportation, warehousing, arts, and educational services. And where we're growing due to strong national economy, regional competitiveness, despite a weak industry, is really just government and utilities. And so I think while that fits into a housing needs assessment, and it shows that we need to do a better, housing is linked to our economic development. It's also linked to our transportation infrastructure, our schools, and everything. And we need to do a better job of pulling up the wages of the people that live here to make sure that they can afford to live here too. So.
Excellent.
And with that, here's an infographic of everything, but that's on our website. And I just want to say, the next steps is we'll have a final deliverable of this on our website. Thrive 2050 is going to the board on Thursday. Our subdivision staging policy has a public hearing on Thursday. And I do want to say, in part of Thrive, we're going to have a Twitter town hall about housing. And then we're going to have a happy hour with myself and Chair Anderson that night to talk about housing issues with the community.
I love the that slogan at the bottom. I don't know whose idea that was to include, but I think that's great.
our amazing communications department has done such a great job with everything and making sure that our advertising is showing what we're doing in Thrive. So I really want to thank them for that. And with that, these are all the resources. And if anyone has any questions, you can ask them or you can email me.
Excellent. Thank you, Lisa. Terrific. Any additional comments from planning? Not necessary, just optional. It's 12 o'clock, so I know everyone's fading.
Nope, nothing from me at least.
Terrific. Okay. Well, thank you, Lisa. Great background research, trends, reports that will inform a lot of our work this summer on housing and the general plan as well. We are going to be we're going to be following up on the budget proposal for new finance tools for housing construction and affordable housing. That's on the council calendar, I think in June. Is it next week, Linda, or is it the week after? I'm sorry. I think it's next week.
2 weeks.
2 weeks.
You're meeting every other week.
Right. So we're coming back in 2 weeks. We're going to be taking up a significant housing financing package. So this will be, I think, helpful background for that conversation as well. But it's terrific. We'll keep working with this as we go.
Mr. Chairman?
Yeah.
Question for the committee and for the public. I know I have a bill related to public use of land and disposition. Is that on the schedule? When is that coming up?
It'll be on the schedule. It'll be lined in when we can get to it. Due to the fact that we're only meeting every 2 weeks, it's a little bit challenging, so it's not presently in the next month. I know that.
Okay. Well, we can talk offline. I just, I hope we can try to get it in at some point here. I think it's relevant to our overall housing goals. Thank you.
All right. So where are we in the agenda here? I think this was.
You have one more item, which was a discussion about the recovery framework for housing.
Yep. Okay. So I know DHCA has probably been on the call waiting. Sorry about that. Let's get a brief update from DHCA about their plans.
Sure. This is Asim again. This is a very interesting discussion. And to Councillor Pearson's point on the 9% credits, we have not forgotten about you. Whatever we said, we're going to keep on pushing. I already met and sent our written comments to the secretary a couple of times. I have talked to Assistant Secretary a couple of times. I've met him. In fact, just prior to COVID-19 situation, I was testifying on something before Ways and Means Committee in Annapolis. And if you look at my testimony, I put in a plug for the 9% credits. So we keep on working at it. For some reason, the lobbying in Baltimore City and Baltimore County is, takes certain points away from us. And I have also reached out to my counterpart in Prince George's County to see if we can join forces and come up with a strategy to push the state in order to have 9% credits allocation just for Prince George's County and Montgomery County. So we're not there yet. In Northern Virginia, it took us, some time, but I think if we keep on pushing at it, someday we'll be there.
Thank you.
So quickly, I know there's almost lunchtime. On the recovery, effort, as you know, the county is still in the response mode, but we're also embarking on the recovery mode, which will be a long road to travel on. So there are 5 missions. One is the government operations services. Second is economic revitalization. Third is health and human services. Fourth in housing. And fifth is education. Education is comprised of Montgomery College and also MCPS. In terms of the housing mission, I lead that housing mission. We have identified 3 work groups. This is not the exhaustive list, but based on what we are hearing or seeing things in the marketplace, we think that these 3 work groups are pretty timely in this time frame. First one is eviction and homeless prevention. This is the joint work group between DSC and HHS, and Frank Demaray, who is also on the line. I think he's still on the line. is going to facilitate that group. Second one is multifamily default prevention. And we had our first meeting last week. I believe Councilman Reamer attended that meeting as well. So, and Stephanie Killian, who is on the line here, she is going to facilitate that group. And third one is common ownership community distress. More often than not, we focus on the other, aspects of our business in terms of affordable housing and tenants, but there are common ownership communities who are also suffering, and especially if they are not getting the assessment paid by the property owners in a timely fashion because of the job loss or the hours are cut, or if their tenants are not paying them, it becomes an issue how to pay the bills for the association. Although the utilities may have a forbearance, but those bills are due and will become due at some point. So those bills have to be paid. So this work group is going to take a look at that aspect of the association's issue. We're going to look at, globally speaking, for all three work groups, 3 months, 6 months, 9 months, and 12-month time frame. We have asked our work groups to plan on being with us for at least 8 weeks until end of July. We know that time is valuable, so we don't want people to think that we are, simply taking their time for granted. And these work groups involve folks from nonprofit, for-profit entities, banking industry, legal aid, trade associations like AOBA and other associations. So just in multifamily work group, we had 22, 25 members. We're going to pare it down going forward. We're going to keep it to more like 9 or 10, folks from different industry groups. So on the common ownership communities, we met 2 times so far. And on the other 2 work groups, we met 1 time so far. These will be weekly meetings. We're going to meet at least once a week. That's what we have advertised to our work group members. And then the point here is we don't have to wait until end of July to come up with something. As the decisions are coming up and the decision points are coming up, we're going to move those decisions to the executive committee, which is comprised of the county executive, council president Sidney Katz, other directors, including me. So we're going to work, in tandem with the executive committee to see where the resources need to be spent, which are scarce at this point, and every single sector in the county is hurting. It's not just housing, but every single sector is hurting at this point. So we're going to see where the resources should be spent and how to leverage those resources. So if there are certain things in terms of long-term scenario, if there are certain things that the council can take in terms of making changes in the law or passing a law, or we need to approach the state, and where we may not have been very successful, in prior years, that doesn't mean that we cannot try again. So we're going to put these options in different buckets and then crystallize the issue over there. We're going to assess the situation. This morning we're talking about eviction and homeless prevention. So as the council member Reamer mentioned to us in our work group, if we can do some kind of a surveys, and this came up in another work group. So we're trying to assess the situation as well, but at the same time, we're not going to spend too much time just in assessing the situation or come up with a survey, which is too complicated for people to even look at. So we're working through it.
Pause you on that one, Director. Thank you for commenting on the data request. I think it is really important that we build a data set for this really challenging set of decisions that we're going to be making over the next, month, 6 months, year, 2 years. I mean, this is not, the impact of this recession is not going to go away anytime soon. So we really need to build a quality set of information to help guide our decisions. So, I'm glad you mentioned it. I would love to see what you will put out. I also think we need to change our internal data collection practices. During the legislative debate that we had over the rent freeze, it was clear that DHCA has zero information about the number of tenants that call saying that they can't, afford to pay their rent because we don't track the data that way. 311 doesn't capture it, and landlord-tenant doesn't capture it. So unfortunately, we were making, a legislative decision with zero information. That's got to change. So I would ask you to think about what kinds of calls will you get from the community that you can then log, and how to build that side of the data capture in addition to a survey that goes out to building owners, one to tenants, however. And I hear your point about not overthinking it and making it too difficult to work with, but a foundational set of data would be extremely useful.
But I agree. We need to have some kind of a survey, and that's something which we are going to work on as we speak in terms of these work groups. Now, in terms of your point for the 311 calls, we do have a data set when the calls are answered by our staff.
Right.
If there is a 311 call which is answered by the knowledge base, then yes, we do not have that data. And that's something which may be, more embedded how the IT system works. So we'll take a look if there is any way possible that we can extract more data out of it. But the way the system is working right now, we do have data set in terms of the calls that get referred to the staff. And that's what we referred to a few weeks ago when we were exchanging emails with you. But in terms of assessing the issue first before we can prescribe a solution, that's the common theme among these all work groups. So we'll be taking a look at that. We'll be happy to update you as we move along in this process. So we have our marching orders. We're going to work through this, and we have some very good subject matter experts within these work groups, along with the council staff and council members. So we value everyone's opinion, and it will be a pretty collaborative effort.
All right, questions on these? All right, thank you. So we'll look forward to hearing the results of those discussions, and I think anything that comes from the executive branch process that's in housing is going to come to the PHED committee. So we'll look forward to receiving the recommendations, whether that's financing or legislative. It's all going to come to PHED for discussion here. So we will take up everything as it comes. Thank you. Okay, Linda, anything else? No? All right.
No, I think we're good.
Okay, well, thank you. Good first committee meeting. Wish we had more. And we will, hopefully in July and August, or July anyway, we'll be able to have a bigger array of meetings. But great beginning. We are in the midst of an unprecedented crisis in housing and economic well-being, and so we're going to have our hands full responding. So look forward to continuing these discussions. Thank you, everybody. We are adjourned.
Have a lovely map that illustrates the original research that our members have done, finding where these